Hey folks, 2005 Ford 500. This will pertain to your '05 to '07 500 and the Mercury variant, whatever that is. I believe it's a Milan or something. I'm not sure, maybe a Sable. Whatever the Mercury version is, it'll pertain to that. It may also pertain to the Ford Freestyle of the similar years. I'm not sure if anything else. So, anyways, you can see we have dual climate control here in the '05 Ford 500. And what happened was the blower motor would be extremely sporadic. It stopped working and it would kick on every now and then, but more than not, it wouldn't work. As I began to troubleshoot it, um, the blower motor itself and the blower motor, I guess it's like a control module, right? It's what we used to call a blower motor resistor. Well, this one, it's all computerized and digital. It's not like the old ones where they just had resistors in there. I'll show you that in a minute. So I was trying to troubleshoot all this, and the weird thing is, if the car, if the ignition was on, but the engine was not running, everything would work perfect. Everything would function. The blower motor would run. All different, everything worked perfect. There was nothing wrong with it, right? As soon as I started the car and the engine was running, the blower motor would shut off. And it would do it every time. It would stay on for about 4 or 5 seconds and it would shut off. And every once in a while it would kick on for a second. So it just didn't make sense to me why it was doing that, only when the engine was running. So the first thing that came to my mind was maybe the alternator was going out, maybe the diodes were bad in it, maybe it was getting some AC voltage in the system, because that can cause weird stuff, right? So I checked that with my multimeter, no AC voltage at all. I mean, everything checked out there. I'm looking at all the wires at the fuse box, making sure there's no corrosion, everything's good. So I got it all back together now. But down there is where the blower motor is, and the fan control relay, or the blower motor resistor, if you want to call it that. Um, and I start monkeying with it, and every once in a while, when I would touch that blower motor control or um, resistor just right, it would kick on, and I'm like, this has to be it. So I went and got my heat gun, because electronics, if they have a cold solder joint, right, put some heat to it, sometimes it'll expand and start working. Well, that didn't help. I took a can of air duster for the keyboard, turned it upside down, got some ice coming out of there, see if that would do anything. Just couldn't get it to do anything. So I had a feeling it was that. But what didn't make sense to me is, why would it only stop working when the engine was running, but it worked fine when the ignition was on, vehicle not running? Now, the only thing that changed was, of course, we go from 12.6 volts up to 13.6, or 13.8, 14.2, whatever the computer calls for out of the alternator. So that's the only difference that I could find, is that we had a higher voltage. So, um, for one of these aftermarket resistors, or control modules, they wanted $80 to $90 at AutoZone and O'Reilly's and all these aftermarket parts. It's a total crapshoot whether it's going to work or not, right? So turn this off. It's all working now. So I just wasn't willing to do that. So I ran up to my local pick and pull yard, and I pulled two of those fan control resistors, just in case, so I'd have an extra one. And I also pulled another blower motor. Even though the blower motor worked, I was suspicious of it, because if it's pulling a little more amperage than it should or something, it can cause that control module, to possibly have some issues. So, anyways, I pulled a blower motor out there, a couple of those modules, and I also pulled this here, this you in the back here, this control, just in case I needed it. I didn't need this, but I have one for parts now. I have an extra blower motor control, and I did go ahead and put the blower motor in there and one of the controls, and that solved it. So it was definitely that control module or resistor, and I'll show you that here in a second. All right, so here's this blower motor control module, what we used to call a resistor block back in the day. This one, and both of the ones I pulled from the pick apart from two cars have the same exact part number. This is only for the dual climate control. If you have just the regular single with the twist knobs, this one won't work. But let me open this up and I'll show it to you. All right, folks, so there's the case right there. And here's what's inside of it. There's no resistors, there's little tiny resistors on the circuit board here, but none of the big coil resistors like what we're used to seeing back in the day. It has a MOSFET there, and it has a huge heatsink for that MOSFET, and that MOSFET is what controls the fan speed. And if you look here, there's 4 connections. It tells you what they are. Trying to see what they see. Ground. Let's turn it over this way. Not focusing very well. So you have ground, and you have negative, you have positive. So you have positive, negative, ground, and then this one says set. So that's the control wire coming off of the head unit. And that's what's in there. So as you can see, it's really not user serviceable. What I found was when I kept messing with the legs of that MOSFET, it would kick on for a second. So I tried to I put some flux on there and tried to reflow some solder in case it had a cold solder joint, and that wasn't it. It's just when you just mess with the board just right. So I'm guessing, it could have been one of these little tiny connections somewhere, could have had a cold solder joint, any one of these surface mount components, which, there's no way I could have fixed that. I'm not equipped for fixing stuff like that. It could have been that chip. So anyways, that's what we're looking at. And this was from like the 2005 era. So who knows what they're running nowadays, if they're still running this or they're running something more advanced, I don't know. So the moral of the story, if you have one of these Ford 500s or the Mercury variant or the Ford, probably the Freestyle too, and your blower motor stops working only when the engine's running, but it runs when the key is on the on position, engine not running, it's a good chance it's this. And there's also a good chance this probably failed because your blower motor it could have been drawing too many amps. I'm not saying that's the case, but it's pretty certain. So I would just replace both of them. And the parts you get from the pick and pull are going to be way better than what you get from your auto parts store. I got an OEM Ford one here, and I got the OEM Siemens fan blower motor. Throw them back in there. You can see what it cost me for one of these, and one blower motor cost me $59 at the pick apart. Yeah, prices have definitely went up. Look at this bullshit. It charged me $1.99 core for the blower motor. This here, I Good price on that. They only charge $8.99. They call it a relay. But then they charged me a. I know there was a core charge. He said he charged me a $3 core charge on there too. Oh, here. You got an environmental fee too. Look at that. They really stick it to you. But anyways, folks, moral of the story, that's your problem. Change out your blower motor too, or at least test it to see how many amps it's pulling. Y'all have a good one.